Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine. I'm from SEB Housing, and this is the information session for the 45 affordable rental units at Alexan Peabody. So the purpose of this information session is to give you a little bit of background information on the available apartments. I'll cover the application, the eligibility and lottery processes, and also what you can expect after the lottery itself is run. So if you have any questions during this session, you're encouraged to either type them into the chat in Zoom, or I'll be asking throughout the presentation if anyone has any questions, and you can unmute yourself at that time to ask the question. So as you heard when you came into the session, this is being recorded, and that's so we can post the recording to SEB Housing's YouTube channel. So if anyone wants to review it after tonight, they can do so. So there'll be some slides coming up on your screen, as you can see now, if you're viewing this on a computer or on an iPad. And so I'll be flipping through those, and it'll give you some more information similar to what you may have already seen in the information packet, which is posted on our website. So just for some background information on who we are, so SEB Housing, we are a off-site affordable housing consulting group. So SEB Housing, we're not the on-site management team. We've been hired by the developer to market the affordable units, conduct this information session, collect and review applications for the lottery, and then determine an applicant's eligibility for the lottery before we actually run the lottery itself. So in the initial phases, we are your main point of contact rather than the management office over at Alexan Peabody. Further along in the process, you will be in touch with the on-site management team, and they will take over as your main point of contact. But for now, SEB Housing is who you should be contacting with questions. The first step in the process is to apply for the lottery and be found to qualify based on the information that you self-reported in that lottery application. Well, if you have any questions during that process, SEB Housing is available to you. The second step in the process is when you'll be in touch with the leasing office over at Alexan Peabody. And that's for lease eligibility. So the lease eligibility that you'll do with the leasing office is separate from the screening with SEB Housing. So during a lease screening, the leasing office might check your credit, your rental history, background checks, that sort of thing. And then once you've been found lease eligible to rent at their property, you'll be approved by the leasing office, and you'll be directed back to SEB Housing to complete your application with us, which means you'll be submitting verification of your income, like pay stubs, bank statements, that sort of thing. But to enter this lottery, you do not need to submit any supporting documentation. So it's later on in the process, if you're one of the top households on each waiting list, you'll be asked to submit all of that supporting documentation to confirm your income. To get into the lottery, though, we just need your lottery application that you'll self-report your income on. So if you haven't already, if you're interested in this opportunity, you should go to SEB Housing's website. We have a page that's dedicated to a little bit more information on Alexan Peabody. If you go to our website, which is sebhousing.com, and you go to the housing opportunities page, you'll select I want to rent, since this is a rental opportunity, and you'll select Alexan Peabody. That will take you to the page specific to this property, which has a downloadable version of the application and the information packet that I mentioned. It has a lot more information about the property and the lottery process. And there's also going to be a QR code and a jot form link to the online application. That link is on your screen right now. So it's the jotform.com/SEBhousing /Alexan Peabody. That's the online application. We encourage you to complete the application online if you can. It's going to be the quickest and easiest way to ensure that your application is received right away by SEB Housing. Once you've submitted that online application, you'll instantaneously receive a confirmation email, just kind of as an auto response, letting you know that it was received. And then later on, about a week or two later, you'll receive a more customized email from our team after we've reviewed the application. If we have any questions, if you've been approved for the lottery, you'll get an email with the lottery application number that you should keep handy. If for any reason completing the application online isn't an option for you, you can download the lottery application from our website. It's a PDF that you'll see, or you can request a paper application to complete. You can email us or call us and ask for that. So there's several ways, excuse me, that you can download that application and get it into us. If you're in the Needham area, you can drop it off at our drop box at our office at Hillside Ave in Needham. All of these ways to submit it to us are on the first page of the application if you're not submitting one online. We do encourage you to get your application in early. It's fairly brief. It shouldn't take you all that long to complete. And again, no supporting documentation is needed at this early stage. It'll just be required of you later on in the process if you are asked to move forward with lease screenings and your final eligibility determination. The application deadline is February 19th, so a little less than a month from now. I should mention too that the online application will no longer be active as of 2 p.m. on that day. So the application deadline is 2 o'clock in the afternoon on February 19th. You do not need to be a resident of Peabody to apply for this lottery. There is going to be local priority for some of the waiting lists, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So it is anticipated that the first affordable units at Alexan Peabody are going to be available for occupancy right after the lottery is run. So in the early spring, March or April, that's when the units are going to be available. There's a lot of this information, like I said, is in the information packet, but Alexan Peabody, just to talk a little bit about the property itself. So it is a brand new 180 unit apartment community located in Peabody. There's going to be 45 affordable units made available through this lottery process. The units are only going to be made available to households who qualify for the affordable housing program. So in this case, it means that your total household income is no more than 80% of the area median income for the Peabody/Boston area. These affordable apartments are located throughout the building. They're not identifiable as affordable in any way. There's quite a few amenities, as you can see on your screen here at this property. So there's a pool, sun deck, clubhouse with a game room. There's a fitness center. There's bike storage. It's a pet-friendly community, so there's a dog park and pet washing stations. It's conveniently located near Route 1 and Route 95, and a lot of shops and restaurants and things in the area. There is a free parking space included for residents. Utilities are not included, so tenants are going to pay the cost of electricity, which is how you're getting your heating and cooling, cooking, hot water, and you'll also, as a tenant, be paying water and sewer charges that are sub-metered. And like I said, pets are allowed. So the affordable unit, I'm going to go back to the first slide here to show the breakdown to you. So the affordable units are being offered in all bedroom sizes. So studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. And there are 2 studio apartments that will rent for $2,132. There's 15 one-bedroom apartments. One of those one-bedroom apartments is accessible to persons with mobility impairment, so it's considered to be disabled accessible. Those one-bedroom units will rent for $2,247. There's 23 two-bedroom apartments, which will rent for $2,674. One of those 2 bedrooms is disabled accessible. And then finally, there's 5 3-bedroom apartments, and the rent will be $3,068. The affordable units were selected by the owner and were approved by Mass Housing as being representative of the units in the building as a whole. So what I mean by that is they're not the smallest units, they're not all clustered in one location in the building, and like I said, they're not identifiable as an affordable unit in any way. The affordable rents that are on your screen that I just read through are not set in accordance with an applicant's income. So that means that these are the rents. They will stay the rents until potentially 1 year from now when they're able to be increased, when the federal housing and urban development area median income is changed. And historically, the AMIs, area median incomes in Boston, have been increasing. So usually that means at least a slight increase to these amounts each year. We don't know if that'll happen every year, but if there is going to be a rent increase to these affordable rents, you would always have advance written notice. Rents cannot increase in the middle of your term. So say you signed a lease for April 1st, 2025, this will at least be the rent for you until April 1st, 2026. Any questions before I move on to the eligibility criteria for the affordable housing program? So more about kind of who qualifies, who's eligible for the lottery. All right. So the affordable housing program, like I said, these affordable apartments are only going to be eligible or only going to be offered to households who qualify for the affordable housing program. And in order to qualify for this program, there's four eligibility criteria that I'm going to go through. The first is that households have to qualify in terms of their income being under that 80% of AMI, which are on your screen now, and I'll circle back to in just a minute. Second, households cannot own a home upon move-in. If you own a home now, you would need to be off the deed and have the property sold before leasing an affordable unit at Alexan Peabody. Something else to keep in mind for eligibility purposes, household priority is given based on household composition. So generally this means that larger households with more people have priority for larger units. And then also for this lottery, keep in mind that one-person households are not able to apply or rent two-bedroom units, and two-person households can't apply for three-bedroom units unless a household member has a disability which requires a reasonable accommodation for an extra bedroom. There's a lot more information on household types and sizes in the information packet as well. And then finally, applicants can't have financial interest in the development or be what's called a related party. What a related party is, if you'd like to be considered a related party if you work for the developer or the management company, you might not be eligible for this opportunity. All right, so to circle back on the eligibility criteria, the first eligibility criteria, the income eligibility criteria. So the affordable units are being made available to rent at prices that are lower than identical or very similar units within the building. So the maximum income limits are set by household, as you can see on your screen now. So that includes everyone who will be living in the unit. These numbers are everywhere. You'll see them on the application and all of that. And as a reminder, we're not going to be verifying your income when you submit your lottery application. You're just going to be self-reporting what your income is at this early stage. So if you are applying for this lottery, say you're applying for a studio and a one-bedroom and you make $90,000, you'll qualify per year, because your total household income would have to be under $91,200 as a one-person household to qualify. And then as you can see, it goes up from there. The maximum income for this lottery for a two-person household is $104,200. Those are set by, those are the maximum income amounts for this program. So if you make $92,000 as a one-person household, you're not going to qualify for any of these units. As you can see below it, there's approximate minimum. It says approximate there on purpose. It's underlined and italicized and everything, because these are not program guidelines, but the management team over at Alexan Peabody, and really most management teams, set a minimum income for all applicants. So market rate units, affordable units, these are all the same in terms of the approximate minimum incomes that they're looking for when they're lease screening you. So if a household is coming in and applying for a lease at Alexan Peabody, if they make $60,000, they may not be approved to rent a property, to rent a studio, I should say, or to rent any of them. And that's because the approximate minimum income is set at 2.5 times the rent per month. So the reason it says approximate is because you might have assets or liquid assets, money in the bank that the management team, so the leasing office, sees and thinks, well, you could access that to pay your rent. So it's possible that if you make slightly below these amounts, you would still be eligible for their lease criteria. It's not guaranteed. So these maximum income limits are set in stone because they're program requirements, while these minimum incomes might be a little bit more flexible because it's going to be the leasing office that ultimately decides if your household meets their lease expectations. Okay, so once you're approved for the lottery, so say you submit your lottery application, SCB Housing gets it, and we give you a lottery application number. Along with that, it's an email that you'll get with a lottery application number and more information about your application, confirming how many bedrooms that you applied for, your whether or not you applied as a local preference household or if you applied for a disabled accessible unit. You want to make sure when you get that email that you're reviewing it thoroughly just to make sure everything looks accurate in terms of what you submitted on your application. When you get that email, you're going to also see that there's a link to a documentation requirements guide. And that guide is just meant to be a document that details exactly what you're going to need to submit to SCB Housing later on in the process if you are submitting bank statements or pay stubs or anything like that. So just keep that set aside so you know what you might need to submit later on. So although we're not going to be requesting pay stubs or anything like that to verify your income at these early stages in the process, I do still want to give you a basic overview of how your income will be calculated for this program. So we're required to count income as a projection of your income over the next 12 months for all household members, and it needs to be gross income. So most of us are not taking home what our pay stubs say we're taking home because there is, health insurance taken out, Social Security taken out, taxes taken out, all of that. But unfortunately, it is the total gross income on your pay stubs, for example, that we do need to count when we're looking at tallying up your total household income. And this includes, bonuses, overtime. That's why we need to try to project what your income will be for the next 12 months. The only exceptions to the total household income would be minors that are earning wages. So maybe you have a 16 or 17-year-old in your household who is working. We're not going to count their wage income when we're looking at your total household income. Also dependent full-time students. Maybe you have a college student in your household. If they're working, we're only going to count the first $480 of their wages for the year when we're determining your eligibility. So not too much there at all. How we calculate income isn't always the same for everyone because everyone's income circumstances are unique. So some applicants have a weekly salary, it's consistent throughout the year. Other people obviously are self-employed or working seasonally, and in those circumstances, we need to look further back into the past in order to anticipate what their income might be for the next 12 months. If you're self-employed, we're also going to need you to submit a profit and loss statement, which provides information on business expenses and that sort of thing. And if you own a business or you're self-employed, we can take some of those business expenses into consideration. But unfortunately, if you're not self-employed, we can't take expenses into consideration when we're looking at your eligibility. So if you pay, a car payment or medical bills and things like that, we can't deduct that from your total household income. So any income that you have been making in the past, generally, we're going to have to assume that you're going to continue making it going forward unless we have some sort of definitive documentation from an employer, for example. You know, if you stopped working your second job and you have something from your employer to confirm your end date or anything like that, that would be something that we might be asking for. So just keep that in mind. And when you're filling out the lottery application, whether it's online or a paper form, make sure that you're filling it out properly. You're listing all of your household income. So not just wages, maybe there's unemployment for someone in your household, Social Security, pension, child support, whatever it might be. Just make sure that that's all listed there. There is no minimum, there's no asset limit for any rental opportunity, but we are still going to need to collect your bank statements and things, because if there is income being generated by those assets, that income needs to count in your total household income. So just keep that in mind. That's the reason we'll still be asking for asset statements from your household. And just to go back a little bit for the minimum income, if you are a household who has a mobile housing voucher, so say you have Section 8 voucher or a MRVP voucher that you're planning to use at Alexan Peabody, you can disregard the minimum incomes because they're not going to apply to your household. Applicants who have a housing voucher, you're going to want to check with the agency that administers your voucher. So maybe Peabody Housing Authority or CTI, whatever it might be, the local nonprofit that issues the vouchers in your area. They'll be able to confirm if these rents are going to be permissible for your household to rent. And but if you don't have a voucher, anybody who doesn't have a voucher, you want to have a total household income that's between the minimum income floor that I mentioned and then that maximum income limit. All right, any questions before I talk about the lottery itself? If you want to apply, and we hope you're interested, I want to mention too that when you're filling out this application, you can apply for more than one unit size. So if you think you might be eligible, or think you might be interested in both a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom, for example, you should make sure to indicate that on your application. There's really no downside of doing that. There is a potential downside if you only list that you're interested in a 2-bedroom and then you later decide after the lottery, well, I would have considered a 3-bedroom, because at that point, the waiting list might be quite long and you'd be added to the end of the waiting list with the non-lottery household. So just write down whatever you think you might be interested in, and we can get you on all the waiting lists that you're eligible for. If you submit your lottery application, once we review the lottery application, we're going to contact you. If there's any information missing or if anything appears to be incorrect, you'll have a chance to resubmit. If you're found eligible for the lottery, I kind of already alluded to this, but you'll be sent an email from info@scbhousing.com or potentially from another SCB Housing email. And it would have your lottery application number. Now that would be a number that is in the form of a series of numbers. That's just the number that's going to be drawn in the lottery. It's not meant to be a ranking of any sort at this time. It's just meant to anonymously identify your household so your name is not called during the lottery itself. So for example, if you were the first person to submit an application and be found eligible for this lottery, your lottery application number would be A.001. That email is also going to confirm whether or not your household qualified for local preference. You will have self-reported that on your application if you believe your household qualifies for that preference. So verification that your household qualifies for local preference is going to be required later on when you're doing that final review with SCB Housing. You might qualify for local preference if you live in Peabody or work in the city or work for the city or a business located within the city, or if you're a guardian of a child attending Peabody Public Schools. Some of the affordable units, like I mentioned, at Alexan Peabody are going to have a local preference, which means that some local preference households will get priority for those units and will have higher positions on the waiting list than households who don't have local preference. There's a lot more about that towards the end of the information packet as well. But again, none of that should dissuade you at all from applying if you don't have local preference, because not all units have that, not all waiting lists are going to have that priority. And we don't know how many local preference households will apply. That letter that has your lottery application number and all of this information that I'm mentioning, you want to make sure that you're really reviewing that to make sure that everything looks accurate. You don't want your lottery application or your application to say that you applied for local preference when you don't have local preference. You want to make sure that everything looks accurate on there. The email is also going to say whether or not you have indicated that you needed a accessible unit, and applicants who are in need of an accessible unit will have priority for those disabled accessible units over households who don't require the accessible features of the unit. And if you're found to be ineligible at any point, so maybe you're over income, you'll be informed by email and you're encouraged to contact us with any questions. On your application too, you will have indicated if your household was a type 1, type 2, or type 3 household. And like I mentioned, that just sort of corresponds with how many people are in your household. In some cases, smaller households can apply for larger units, but in general, larger households are going to have priority over smaller households for these larger units. So the information packet has a lot more information on the household type, and you'll be able to find which criteria your household kind of falls under to be able to identify yourself as a type 1, 2, or 3 household. And as I mentioned, for this lottery, a type 1 household, a one-person household cannot apply for a 2-bedroom unit, but a 2-person household, so maybe 2 adults who share a bedroom, can apply for a 2-bedroom. They're just not going to have priority. They would be considered a type 1 household. So the lottery itself is going to be held virtually, much in the same way that this info session is being held via Zoom on March 11th at 6 o'clock. So it will likely be held digitally, meaning that the lottery numbers are going to be randomized on the screen and the results will be shared with you via screen share, just like I'm sharing these slides. Every lottery number is going to be included in the lottery, so every lottery number will have a position on these waiting lists. I'm mentioning that because sometimes we think of lotteries, and in this case, there are 45 total units. So some might think that we're only going to pull 45 numbers, but that's not going to be the case. Everyone's going to have a position on the waiting list. Because the purpose of the lottery is to establish an order on the waiting list. So in general, it is beneficial for your number to be called, towards the top of the list, but it may not be the deciding factor on whether or not you'll be moving forward in the process to lease one of these units. Because SEB Housing first needs to sort those results. So for example, if a qualified type 1 household, so a 2-person couple, is drawn first in the lottery and they applied for a 2-bedroom unit, they're still going to be behind all type 2 households on that 2-bedroom waiting list, because the larger households, so type 2 households, are going to have priority on that waiting list. So you're not really going to know during the lottery itself all that much about where you'll fall on the waiting list. But the good news is that pretty much immediately following the lottery, we populate the waiting list, and taking all of these considerations into account, we sort the waiting list, the results of the lottery, and we send them to all of the lottery applicants by email by usually that evening, if not the next morning. So you'll know where you are on the waiting list and maybe when you can expect to be in touch with the leasing office to move forward in the process. When you're reviewing that email, you're going to see the waiting lists are attached. You're going to find your lottery application number so you can see where you fall on the waiting list. And we will connect the top households from each waiting list with the management team over at Alexan. And you'll also be given the leasing office's information, and you'll have about 10 days to apply for a lease at the property. Just a reminder again, the lease screening that you do at the leasing office at Alexan Peabody is going to be completely separate from SCB housing screening. SCB housing is screening you for eligibility into the lottery and then eligibility for the affordable housing program, not your screening to lease at the property itself. The leasing office that does the lease screening is going to be doing the same sort of lease screening that would be done for market rate households that are applying for market rate units at Alexan Peabody. So that might include, like I said, credit, rental history check, that sort of thing. And then just be aware that usually leasing offices are inviting more households, excuse me, forward than they have available units. So for example, at Alexan Peabody, there's 2 studio units, but 4 or more households might be invited from the waiting list to complete their lease screening. That's very typical of management companies because often the process of leasing units is slowed down by households who don't qualify, or maybe they decided they're no longer interested in this opportunity. So there's a lot of factors to kind of think about. So immediately following the lottery, if you see that you're the first household on the waiting list, you don't want to immediately inform your current landlord if you're renting somewhere that you're giving notice and moving into a unit at Alexan Peabody, since you still haven't done all of the lease screenings or screenings with SCB housing. So we always just like to caution people about that. If you are lease approved, that's the point in the process where having a position towards the top of the waiting list is beneficial, because if say you're the first person on the 2-bedroom waiting list, you're going to have the first chance to reserve one of the affordable units. So you'll have the opportunity to have a look at all of the 2-bedroom units and decide which one is works best for your family. You might want a certain location within the building, and all of that. And then once you've reserved a unit, the second person on the 2-bedroom waiting list would be able to choose from the remaining units, and so on. Once you've reserved an affordable unit, the leasing office is going to let SCB housing know, and like I said, you'll be coordinating with us from that point to submit all of your income, asset, and tax documentation, so we can now do your final affordable housing program review. And then hopefully by that point, you've taken a look at the guide that was sent over to you with your lottery application number, and you've been able to gather some of that information that we'll need from you, pay stubs, tax returns, that sort of thing. And you'll have about 10 days to get that into us, but we certainly understand that there is a lot of information that needs to come in. So we work with you, if you have most of the information up front, but not quite all of it, you'll be sent an incomplete notice, and you'll be working with colleagues of mine to be able to get a completed application into us. So if you don't have everything that we need on the first try, there's no worries about that. We'll be able to work with you to get that, get all the information that's needed. Once SCB Housing approves your file, we will notify the leasing office, and you'll be able to sign a lease for the reserved unit that you have already chosen and establish that move-in date. And like I said, these units are supposed to be available March and April, so there really won't be any lag time between the lottery and the lease screenings, hopefully. So once you've leased up in an affordable unit, you don't have to do any more screenings of your income until at least your lease renewal date. So after the first 9 months or so, we hope that you've loved living at Alexan Peabody and you want to remain there. If you want to continue living there beyond that first year of the lease, you'll need to recertify your income with the management team over at Alexan Peabody, and you'll have to do what's called a recertification before the lease renewal. So sometime probably around this time next year, if you were to lease in the spring, about 9 months into your tenancy, you'd be asked to complete that recertification to confirm if you still are qualified for the affordable housing program. The good news is that if you've gotten a raise or you just have more income than you do right now, you can remain eligible for the affordable housing apartment as long as your total household income doesn't exceed 140% of the current year's area median income. So in the information packet, the figures are given, but to give you an example, a household of two would have qualified for this lottery if you made at or below 80% of area median income. That income limit for a two-person household right now is $104,200. That same family of two can make up to $145,880 at the time of their recertification and still remain eligible for the affordable apartment. So a little bit of wiggle room there. If your household has an increase in income, it doesn't mean that you automatically no longer are able to rent the unit at the affordable price. That covers most of what I wanted to get through from the information packet, or just about the lottery process and the application process. Do you have any questions that I didn't touch on?
Hi, so I do have a question. Does
Sure.
does it matter, like, when you apply for in your application, does that matter, like if you're 1, 2, or 3 that applied? Does that help at all to get it on the list as a priority?
So it depends on what unit you're applying for. So if you're applying for a 2-bedroom, type 2 households are going to type 2 and 3 households are going to have priority for 2 bedrooms. If you're only looking to rent a studio or a 1-bedroom, everyone has the same priority. There's no, it doesn't matter if you're a 1-person household or a 3-person household.
So if you're showing up, let's say, I don't know, 4 on the list that applied, how does that benefit you, or does it at all?
So it depends who's ahead of you. If you are number 4 pulled in the lottery on the list of just who was drawn in the lottery, we're going to then sort those results onto the waiting list. So maybe you're a type 2 household applying for a 2-bedroom apartment. If nobody ahead of you on the waiting list, if persons 1, 2, and 3 on the waiting list, or they have a smaller household type, they're going to be below you on the waiting list. So that's why you don't really know when we do the lottery where you're going to fall. But like I'm going to pull up the info pack just so you can see, because the information packet sort of breaks down how the waiting lists are going to be
prioritized.
Exactly. I'll pull that up for you now. So it should be page 11 here.
Can you share like how many people that you have listed now, like the number, or no?
Yeah, I think I checked earlier today. I think it was about 50. So not too bad, since there's quite a few units here. So still another month, but yeah, I don't expect that it'll be horribly long, these waiting lists. But so as you can see here, these are the local preference waiting lists. There's also 2 bedrooms under the open waiting list. So if you don't have local preference, if you're a type 2 household, you're going to have top priority. All eligible type 1 households will be below you. If you go down to 3 bedrooms, larger households have priority. But if you're looking for a 1-bedroom unit, everyone has the same priority, because there is no priority depending on what your household type is.
All right, and then I had one more question. If you're a couple, like 2 people, and you're expecting a baby, like let's say right after, 2 or 3 months after you move, like your move-in date, or and you put that on the application, does that count as a 2-person or a 3-person?
So put it on the application. My colleagues will ask for any information they need from you. I believe you will be a 3-person household.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
And then you said something about like background checks, like from a credit perspective. Is there a
Yeah.
certain score you're looking at, or how does that
So
work?
that we're not looking at it. That's the leasing office that would be doing
Leasing
that.
company?
So yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know what their scores are, but yeah, pretty much every management office is looking at some sort of minimum score. But yeah.
You're not sure what that is. Okay.
Right. Yep.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks for the questions. Anybody else? Once again, the application deadline is February 19th at 2 because that online application will close at 2 p.m. that day. And if you have any questions, the best way to get in touch with us, if you think of anything after tonight that you weren't able to ask or didn't think to ask, you can email us at info@sdbhousing.com. And this is also our phone number here if you're more comfortable calling. So yeah, we look forward to getting your application. And please let us know of any questions after the fact, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.